primary colors. Those colors are yellow, red, and blue. We know that all other colors come from these three colors. And basic color theory tells us that red, yellow, and blue are evenly spaced on the color wheel, forming somewhat of a triangle. The secondary colors are orange, purple, and green. They are evenly spaced between the primary colors. So two primary colors makes one secondary color. Yellow and blue make green, equal parts yellow and red make orange, and equal parts red and blue make purple. The tertiary colors are a bit more subjective. They are evenly spaced between a primary and a secondary color. So one primary plus one secondary equals a tertiary, or sometimes called intermediate color. Green plus blue makes a blue-green. Blue plus purple or violet makes a blue-violet, and so forth. Let's get started by creating the primary colors on our color wheel. To do this, you're going to want to use the polygonal lasso tool, and you will trace over that triangular shape. Once you have made the shape, you are going to use your paint bucket tool, and you'll go over here to the colors panel. Now, red is all the way down at the very bottom of this color spectrum slider. Once you've done that, in this box, you're going to go to the top right-hand corner, and that is your pure red. Now, you can see if I were to hover over that triangle and try to fill it, I'm not able to, and that's because I don't have a layer selected. So you'll need to make a new layer. You will title this your primary colors, and then you can go ahead and fill it with the red. I'm going to deselect the shape that I have selected, use my polygonal lasso tool again, and then I will trace over the yellow triangular shape. Again, I'm going to use my paint bucket tool. I'm going to my color spectrum slider, and I'm going to take my time to find what appears to me to be a true yellow. Again, you want to be in that top right-hand corner. Then I will fill that shape with yellow. Command D to deselect that shape. Use my polygonal lasso tool again to trace over blue and fill it with a really true sort of cobalt blue color. Once you have done that, you can move on to the tertiary colors. So you will do that again with your polygonal lasso tool. You're going to trace over that hexagon shape. Now remember, if you start getting like something really crazy with your polygonal lasso tool, you can always double click to complete the shape and then Command D to deselect and start over. So right now I'm tracing over the hexagon for violet, which is just another name for purple. I'm going to use my paint bucket tool to find a really true purple and then fill it. Remember, the purple should be an even mixture between red and blue. You'll complete this for all of your secondary colors, and then you'll move on to the tertiary colors. The best way to create this circular shape for the tertiary colors is to use your elliptical marquee tool. It's hidden underneath that rectangular marquee tool. Now remember, if I hold down Shift while I use the elliptical marquee tool, I create a perfect circle. And then I'm going to adjust it and center it right over the top of that circle. I'm going to take my time to find a really accurate red-orange and then fill that shape with my paint bucket tool. So you can see that I also filled the hexagon because that was still selected. So I'm going to press Command D to deselect, go back to my elliptical marquee tool, hold down Shift, create the circle, and then fill it with my red orange. Now, instead of redrawing each of the circles, what I can do is hold down Option on my keyboard while I'm on the Move tool, and that will duplicate the circle. Then I can go back to my Paint Bucket tool and choose the hue red violet in this case, and then fill it. When you're complete, your color wheel will look something like this. It should be a really even flow of colors. At this point, I'd recommend checking with a classmate or your instructor just to get their opinion on the flow of the colors. Next, we're going to keep moving on with our chart. So at the bottom of your screen, you can see there's some boxes for the primary hues, secondary, and intermediate, those hues that you just created. Let's use the rectangular marquee tool to draw that rectangular shape. And we're going to use a tool that we haven't talked about as a class yet. That is the eyedropper tool. I can hold the eyedropper tool over the top of another color. It gets that exact hue. Now I'm going to go back to my Paint Bucket tool and fill in that rectangular shape. Just like you did with the circles, you can hold down Option to duplicate the rectangular shape, then go back to your eyedropper tool. In this case, I'm finishing the primary hues, so I'm going to get yellow and fill it in with the Paint Bucket tool. You'll repeat that for all of the primary hues, the secondary hues, and the intermediate or tertiary hues. Let's look at the right-hand side of the page. Here we have an area that's talking about the intensity of the color. So essentially we are going to create a gradient between red and green. Red and green are complementary colors. They're across from each other on the color wheel. We will do the same thing for blue and orange, and then for yellow and violet. So these are the primary and secondary colors that are across from each other on the color wheel. They are complementary colors. The interesting thing about complementary colors is they really vibrate when you look at them next to each other. They're intense, they have a lot of contrast, and we often see them used in like fast food restaurants or for sports teams. If you think of the Lakers, they're that yellow and purple. That's because they go really well together. They have a lot of energy. But what's interesting about complementary colors is that when they are mixed, they create a really dull hue, like a brown or a gray. So let's use our rectangular marquee tool. We'll start with red. We're going to trace over that red rectangle. We'll use our eyedropper again to get that hue, fill it with our paint bucket. I'm going to go back to the Move tool, hold down Option. That will duplicate my rectangle. And now I want to create a gradient from red to green. Before I do the other steps of red, I think I'll make my green first. So I'm going to go to my eyedropper tool, choose green, fill it with the paint bucket, use my Move tool, move it to the side, and we're going to have kind of two shades of green getting to that neutral hue. So this time I'm going to work at a diagonal towards that left bottom corner of my color panel. I'm going to go about a third of the way down, choose a hue, fill it. Again, you want to repeat that green shape. Go about another third of the way down, and fill that box. You might need to play around with this gradient. Okay, so this hue that is in the middle where it says neutral, it should be an even mixture of the red and the green. You don't want to go all the way down here to this bottom left-hand corner because that's just going to make black. So again, this is a little bit subjective, but you want to find kind of an interesting hue that's really neutral, that kind of looks like a gray, maybe a brown, and that looks like it's somewhere in between green and red. You'll fill it with your paint bucket, and you're going to repeat those steps with red to that neutral mixture of red and green. You'll do the same thing with blue to orange, and the same thing with yellow to violet. Your chart will start to look something like this. Here we have what is going to be a monochromatic gradient. And what that means is it's mono being one and chroma being color. So one color. You can choose any color on your color wheel for this. You're going to use the elliptical marquee tool again. You're getting a lot of practice with that in this exercise. And the first thing you want to do is actually make the box for the hue that you're working with. So I just deselected that. I'm going back to the center where it's hue. And I think I'll do the blue-green. So again, I'll use my eyedropper, select that hue, fill it with my paint bucket. And you can see here, you're going to make shades of that color. That means that it's moving towards black. The one on the far right, you want it to be not quite all the way to black, even though it says black. I still want to be able to see that it's that hue. So think of just a very, very dark shade of that color. And then moving on the top of our color panel towards the left, that's where we get tints of the color. So tint means white plus a color. That might be a bit confusing, but I like to remember it with the I in white being the I in tint, and the A in dark, the A in shades. So dark shades, white tints. You'll complete that gradient, and then you're going to do the same thing for an achromatic color scheme going from white to black. It does not matter what color you are at on the color panel when you're creating this gradient of an achromatic color. You just want to be all the way on this left-hand side of the color panel going from white to black, and you want it to be even steps. What that does is it just keeps it with no hue in that color. As long as you're on this left-hand panel, it doesn't matter if you slide the color spectrum, it's all the same. After you've done that, the last step is to use the type tool, and you are going to go ahead and label each area of your chart. So you'll want to label your complementary color schemes, your monochromatic, and your triadic.